Hello and welcome to our webinar. The webinar itself is all about Unit 9 of the BTEC Teamwork and Personal Development in the Community qualification, and it will take about 15 to 20 minutes of your time. Unit 9 is all about volunteering, and as cadets this is something that you will have no doubt been involved in at some point, where you've used your own time doing something to assist others. You may have been involved in helping the community on different projects, assisting at events, fundraising, or helping others in one way or another. The webinar has two key objectives. Primarily, the purpose of the webinar is for me to guide you through Unit 9 and the 4 tasks within the workbook step by step. And secondly, I will provide contact details for the 3 area managers. They will be able to put you in contact with the regional manager who looks after your cadet unit should you have any queries after this webinar has finished. For this session, you will need a copy of Workbook 2 and the learning guide to support Workbook 2. You may have those in either a paper copy or as an electronic copy. Just to give you a quick overview so you know what to expect from this webinar, there are 4 written tasks in the workbook. They will cover understanding the importance of volunteering, knowing what voluntary opportunities are out there, understanding the skills required for volunteering, and undertaking volunteering. This webinar will guide you through those tasks step by step, and you can pause the webinar to give you time to complete the task in your workbook. One point to note before we get started is that on each slide there will be a link to the relevant learner guide pages in the green circle prompt on the top right hand corner of your screen. These will help you to research your answers. Task 1 is asking you to explain why volunteering is important. You can find the task itself on page 40 of the workbook and the supporting material in the learning guide on pages 83 to 85. Uniformed organisations rely on the help of volunteers to operate and function well. You will need to look at this in a little more detail and the importance of volunteering. There are a number of ideas for you to consider in the learning guide on page 84, including the fact that volunteers can enhance and extend services that an organisation can provide. They can also help the organisation cope with stretched finances or some of the heavy demands that are placed on them. As the command verb is to explain, you need to give examples in your answer. So think about your own organisation and why they need volunteers. Once you've had a chance to think about this question, then there is space in your workbook on page 40 for you to give that detailed answer. There's some additional guidance in the learning guide along with an example answer to help you. Press pause now so that you can complete this task in your workbook. Once you've completed this section, then task 1 will be complete. Moving on to task 2, we are taking those thoughts of why volunteering is important a little further, and we'll look at the benefits to be gained from undertaking volunteering activity. You can find the task itself on pages 41 and 42 of the workbook and the supporting material in the learning guide on pages 85 to 87. The task is split up into 2 parts: the benefits that volunteers can provide to uniformed organisations and the benefits that volunteers get from volunteering. The first part of the task looks at the benefits that volunteers can provide to uniformed organisations. The learning guide is useful in that on page 85 there are a number of ideas for you to consider, including the fact that volunteers can bring expertise to an organisation. They can bring new ideas or fresh approaches, and possibly enthusiasm, which may energise a team working on a project. Think about your own organisation. What have been the benefits of having volunteers in your own organisation. Press pause now so that you can complete part 1 of the task in your workbook, where there is space for you to describe each benefit, and you should aim to write at least 1 or 2 sentences for each one. The second half of the task is still looking at the benefits of volunteering, but this time focuses on the benefits for the volunteer. If an individual spent time doing something that assisted others, what would they gain from that experience? You may have ideas of your own, but the learning guide provides a number of ideas for you to consider, including how volunteering may provide an individual with a purpose and a sense of belonging. It may help to build their confidence and their self-esteem, or it may bring enjoyment and the opportunity to build on their personal skills. Think about your own experience. What benefits have you gained from volunteering? Press pause now so that you can complete the second half of the task in the workbook on page 41, where there is space for you to describe each benefit. Again, you should aim to write at least 1 or 2 sentences for each one. Once you have answered both sections, so benefits for the organisation and benefits for the volunteer in full detail, then task 2 will be complete. Moving on to task 3 now, we will be identifying different types of voluntary work available. You can find the task itself on page 43 in the workbook and the supporting material in the learning guide on pages 88 to 90. All of the uniformed youth organisations, the military uniformed organisations and the emergency and rescue services use volunteers. The actual work that volunteers can carry out is very much dependent on the requirements of each organisation, so roles can and do vary between organisations. The learning guide details a number of different roles and the commitment required for the role, ranging from special constables supporting regular police constables, to army reservists, or to another role that you may be more familiar with, the role of the Cadet Force's adult volunteer. The workbook task asks you to identify, so state 1 role for the 4 organisations that are listed, those being the Fire and Rescue Service, the Army, the Ambulance Service, and the Royal Air Force. The learning guide will help you to do this. Press pause now so that you can complete task 3 in your workbook. Once you've completed the written task, then task 3 will be complete. Task 4 gives you the chance to explain the skills required for volunteering, and you can find the task on page 44 in the workbook and the supporting material in the learning guide on pages 92 to 94. Volunteers will need a variety of skills to carry out a role effectively, and as we mentioned earlier, each role will be different, and therefore in relation to this task, each role will require different skills. The learning guide provides a list of skills as an example, and they can be split into 2 categories: hard skills and soft skills. The task asks you to consider a voluntary role that you have undertaken and identify 3 skills that you used whilst in that role, and then go on to explain why they required for the role that you did. As the command verb is to explain, you need to use examples to back up your answers. Referring to your own experience and explaining why you needed those 3 skills will do just that. The skills you use in your answer can either be hard skills, soft skills, or a mixture of both. Press pause now so that you can complete the task in your workbook. Once the workbook has been completed, then task 4 will be complete. The last part of this unit is a practical task, and you need to demonstrate that you have been able to carry out voluntary work and demonstrate the appropriate skills that are required. This is something that will usually be carried out as part of your normal activities, so you won't have to do anything additional. This last part of the unit can then be signed off as complete, which will complete the whole unit. So finally, once you've completed the 4 tasks, your workbook will be ready to be submitted for marking. 2 final points from me regarding the workbook would be to firstly, double check your work and ensure that you have answered each question in full and as per the command verb before it is submitted. And secondly, to ensure that you complete the front page of the workbook in full, including your name, email address, CVQO reference number, and cadet unit, and that you sign and date the learner declaration on the front page. Having this information completed is key, as it will help us to process your workbook as quickly as possible once we receive it. If you are using an electronic workbook and will upload it to Moodle, the front cover may look slightly different, but the key elements on the front page must still be completed. If you find you have any additional questions following this webinar, then please don't worry. There are a number of regional managers that cover the country and your unit specifically. On the map here are the email addresses of Steve, Andy, and Richard. They will be able to put you in contact with your own regional manager, who will be able to help you with any queries you do have. I hope that this webinar has helped you a little more in understanding what is required for each task. Thank you for joining us and good luck with completing Unit 9.